All right, all right. What's up, everyone? Just want to welcome you all back to another episode of Conversations with GRX. I'm Jake Goldstein.
And I'm Jared Catini.
And in the first episode, we talked about our story, right? We talked about how Jared and myself got into this industry. We talked about how Growth RX came to life. We talked about why we wanted to start Growth RX.
But in this episode, we want to talk about something we see and hear every single day working with practices across the country. And that topic is why so many practices struggle to acquire new patients and ultimately struggle to scale their business.
And just to expand on that, most practices think that they have a marketing problem. And I think the reality is that the issue is usually much deeper than that.
So today, we're going to break down what modern patient acquisition actually looks like and what the practices that are winning right now are doing differently.
Cool. So let's talk about, first of all, why practices struggle with growth. So my question for you, Jared, is from your perspective, why do you think practices struggle with growth even when they're spending money on marketing?
Yeah. So I would say, I think one of the biggest reasons that they struggle with growth is because they approach their marketing and patient acquisition in a very fragmented way, right? And what I mean by that is they might run ads, maybe they post on social media, maybe they have someone working on their search engine optimization, right? How their website ranks across Google. And I'll give you an example. I was talking to a plastic surgeon the other day, and she had a freelancer who was managing her website and taking care of all the SEO. She had an agency running her ads across Meta and working those leads for her. And then she had a different, so basically a third marketing company that was managing her Google ads. And in that situation, it's difficult to comprehensively understand what's producing the best results and the best ROI for your business. But none of those efforts are really aligned around the actual patient journey. So a patient today might discover a practice on Instagram, for example, check Google reviews, watch a few videos, and then finally decide to send a message or fill out a form. And if that experience breaks down anywhere along that path, whether it's something like slow response times, unclear messaging, or just poor follow up in general, that opportunity is usually gone. So it's not always that practices aren't generating interest, it's that the experience around that interest isn't designed to actually convert and it's fragmented amongst multiple companies and multiple freelancers. So, Jake, let me ask you, what do you think practices misunderstand most when it comes to marketing?
Great question, Jared. So I think the biggest misconception is that marketing is just advertising, right? I think a lot of the practices, and I mean, a lot of the ones that we work with early on, they believe that growth is just about running ads on Facebook or Google. But marketing today is really about the entire experience, a potential patient has with your brand, right? It's the content that they see online, it's the before and afters when they scroll through your website. I mean, a big one, you were just talking about SEO, Jared, but a big one is going to be the reviews that they read, right? And I think ultimately it's how quickly someone responds when they reach out. So I think all of the things that influence whether someone decides to trust you with your care are all the things that I just mentioned. And I think that's why we see so many practices say they've tried marketing before and it didn't work. I think that's like the number one thing we hear when we're working with providers. I think because what they really tried was just one tactic. It's not the complete approach to attracting and converting patients at a high level.
No, that makes complete sense. And I think it's something we see every single day. I can't tell you how many times we've had a conversation with somebody and they said, you know, I tried ads on Instagram and they didn't work, right?
Yeah, and I think, ultimately it comes down to the system behind what they're doing in the first place. They'll run ads for a month, they'll spend $1,000, as far as ad spend goes, and they quit there. They need to understand that, advertising and marketing, it does take time. And I also think there's a misconception. The old way of advertising is, most marketing companies are used to telling all their clients, not even in just the cash pay medical practice space, but that there's a large learning phase, right? And that it's going to take months and months to start generating results. I think that is a blatant lie in the industry and something that we tell our clients every day that it's untrue. I think with Meta, there is a learning phase naturally. And I think that learning phase is, I mean, two weeks. Google, there is a larger learning phase, but I think one of the biggest excuses that marketing companies make when their results are lacking is they blame it on the learning phase and just let's wait, let's not touch it. It's going to send things back into learning. We got to restart the process, the algorithm restarts. That's what a lot of marketing companies are used to telling their clients and practices. So I think when we do work with these clients, I mean, they have PTSD from their experiences. So it's kind of up to us to really, reverse engineer where their issues are, what transpired before working with us, and kind of get them on a better track.
Yeah, and
So
Jake, I
Jared, my
think
next yeah.
no, I was going to ask you just related on this topic, especially when we're talking to these practice owners and they'll say they tried a tactic and they'll say it didn't work for them or it doesn't work in general. And I want to ask you about your experience, right? When you talk to a provider and they say, "Hey, Jake, I ran some ads on Instagram and Facebook and they don't work." And I want you to tell us about your experience when you dig a little bit deeper and you figure out what their ads looked like previously, because I think an important note for anyone watching is that not all ads are created equal.
Yeah, great question, Jared. I think ultimately it comes down to the new feature, right? Andromeda, right? The new update when it comes to meta and content. Content is king. So when we work with clients, we do an audit, right? We really, at a high level, look through everything that they're running across the board, right? See kind of what they're doing, what the results look like. But from a creative perspective, what we really nail in on is the content aspect of it. And I mean, all of your favorite creators today, right? Like Alex Hormozy, Gary Vee, right? All these guys are going to preach content, content, content. If you're not continuously cycling in new content and refreshing creatives, then you're going to fall behind versus your competitors that are doing that at a high level. So the first thing that I would say is, what do creatives look like? Most cases, static, right? We're talking about static graphics. We're talking about very generic content. It tells you nothing about the business. It tells you nothing about the provider. It tells you nothing about the services and the offer that's being displayed, right? So content is going to be something that we really drill on and see if we can improve. What we do at Growth RX, and something that we're really, really proud of, is we're going to create very high level, bespoke, engaging content that's going to feature the provider. It's going to feature the staff. It's going to feature the services at play, right, in real time. It's going to showcase the before and afters. We really want to display exactly what the client is offering at a high level in a very visual way. We live in a very modern, visual world, right? Thanks to TikTok, thanks to Instagram Reels, that is how we consume content. And that's why Meta is at the top of the leaderboard when it comes to advertising channels right now. So I think if we can showcase these treatments at a high level in a very visual way, you're going to outperform your competitors in the market.
100%.
So Jared, so when we look at the practices that are actually growing consistently, what are they doing differently? And let's not talk too much about the content part because I just touched on that at a high level. What do you think outside of content providers and practices are doing differently that are actually growing consistently above their competitors?
I'd say the biggest difference is that they treat growth like a core part of the business, right? They're willing to invest into marketing because they understand that marketing is really that core feature that is going to grow the practice. And I would even argue that beyond the results and the experience that they deliver for their patients, marketing and sales is probably, 1A, 1B with how important it is. And the practices that are winning today are doing a few things really well, in my opinion. The first is you touch on this, they're building authority through content, right? People know who they are when they think of a certain procedure or a certain treatment or a specific industry, like that provider is the one who comes top of mind for them. They're showcasing the provider and the results that they can produce, so before and afters. And most importantly, they're present across multiple platforms where patients are actually making decisions. So they're not treating their marketing in, a way where it's like, hey, we're just gonna focus on Meta, for example, or we're just gonna focus on our website SEO. They're really building their marketing in a comprehensive way. And they're making it extremely easy for someone who's interested to start a conversation with them, right? They understand that patients today, they're researching, they're comparing their options, evaluating providers online way before they ever step into an office and way before they ever submit a form or actually inquire about an appointment or a consultation. So ultimately, the practices that lean into visibility, education, and the patient experience are the ones that tend to win in their markets.
No, those are so important. And Jared, I have a couple follow-up questions for you on this. So you touched on sales and how important sales is in the process of, winning patients over, generating revenue. Dig into that a little bit more. So when we talk about sales with these cash pay medical practices, what are some things that they can do to track this better and implement processes to convert more?
My biggest recommendation, as soon as you start running ads, as soon as you start trying to acquire new patients using any paid media, the first thing you're going to want to invest in is a CRM. Because as we talk about this sales process, what's going to be really important is tracking your numbers, right? So every month as a business owner, you want to know first and foremost how many leads are you generating. Of those leads that you generate, how many actually turn into appointments? Of those appointments, how many actually show? And then of the people that show, what's that in revenue number? So you're able to make data driven decisions in regards to your sales process. Because as you start spending more and more and more money on marketing, tracking these numbers are going to be really important. And there's going to be bottlenecks at certain stages as your practice starts to grow, right? So, for example, we might talk to a practice owner and they might say, yeah, last month I generated, 100 leads, for example, and I was only able to schedule 2 appointments. Well, at that point, like that business owner is experiencing a different problem because they're generating leads, but the problem is identified further down that marketing funnel in terms of turning that lead into an actual appointment. And there's optimizations that you can make to your sales process depending on where your bottleneck is specifically. So, ultimately, I think having a CRM is probably the most impactful way that you're going to be able to track these numbers. And ultimately, knowing those numbers is going to allow you to make more data-driven decisions around what you need to fix and what you need to change.
Yeah, I mean, Jared, the CRM aspect of it is so important. I think early on when we were building out Growth RX, we recognized that. And I think the CRM is the foundation of our system. Everything flows through it, right? So from a sales pipeline perspective, through our opportunities, sector of our system, it's so important. And we preach this to our clients every day to keep that pipeline updated, not only with where they are in the stage, but revenue numbers, because that can be the single source of truth to understand from an ROI standpoint, this is where we are and this is where we're trending towards to hit those KPIs and those numbers. Jared, another question I had was, you were talking a lot on that practices really that are winning today are doing a few things really well. One of the things that stuck out to me was you mentioned that they're present across multiple platforms where patients are actually making decisions. Break that down. So what platforms are you speaking of? And that's so important for our clients to be present on at a high level.
Yeah. So what I would say on this is think about the way that you make a buying decision, right? Unless you're buying something that's a very low cost and you can make an immediate decision on whether or not you want to buy that thing. A lot of the things that we market for on behalf of our clients, these are expensive services. They're expensive treatments. It's not something where somebody's just going to see, one piece of content or one ad, for example, and immediately say to themselves, okay, I want to buy this, and this is the provider that I want to go to buy that service or that treatment. And so what I'm talking about here is really optimizing your digital presence. So as that patient does their research, which they're gonna do before they come into your office, you want to be present, right? So what I mean by that is you want to have content across social media. So if you can post on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, like if you can run ads on those channels as well to get in front of your local community. Beyond that, I'm talking about things like organic SEO, right? So how your website ranks when people go to Google or even LLMs, like AI search models today, like as they're searching for things, is your website appearing? Beyond that, you can really appear in that patient journey on Google Ads, right? And so as you start having this marketing ecosystem working on your behalf, as this person goes across the internet, they're going to see your name everywhere, right? They're going to see you on search engines, they're going to see you on social media. And so as they consider buying a specific service or treatment, they're going to think about you because you're the doctor, you're the provider that they're seeing all across the internet.
I love that. Amazing. Amazing.
So, Jake, let me ask you, one of the biggest things we're seeing right now is the role of AI, and especially the role of AI in the sales process. So, what I want to know from you is how do you see AI changing patient acquisition?
I'm smiling, Jared, because you know I could talk about this all day. So I think AI is just going to fundamentally change how practices handle patient communication, right? So I think historically the entire process relied heavily on front desk, right? That's the traditional process. So I think every inquiry had to be handled manually, right? And responded to. Questions had to be answered individually. And follow up was just entirely dependent on the team's availability. But what we're seeing now is the ability for AI to handle the early stages of that interaction. So at GrowthRx specifically, what we're doing is we're implementing extremely high level voice AI, text-based AI systems that can be instantly responded to, right? Respond to those leads as quickly as possible. What we're doing with these AI solutions is we're nurturing those conversations, we're answering common questions, and we're even pre-qualifying potential patients before they even speak to someone in the office. And we do this because the last thing that we want to do for our clients and our practices that we work with is book somebody for 30 minutes, right? Take up 30 minutes on their calendar, and that person not be a good fit in the first place. We want to make sure we're pre-qualifying these individuals so that we're only booking the highest quality patients possible. So these systems can guide patients through conversations, right? They collect the right information, and they also are going to book those appointments directly onto the practice's calendar. Our goal with our AI solutions is to minimize the need for human touch points. We worked with a lot of, established businesses, but we do work with a lot of startup, right? Startup practices that don't have the necessary front desk staff, the sales team to do these things on their own. So if we can minimize the need for human follow-up and human touch points, we're already winning. And what that does is it's going to dramatically reduce the number of missed opportunities. And the really interesting part of that is these systems are improving every day, and it's scary how fast these AI solutions are improving. The conversations are really becoming more natural, they're becoming more intelligent, and really more capable of handling complex interactions. I mean, I see it every day. We're monitoring conversations that our AI is having, and I'm impressed every single day. I'm sure you are too, Jared. Ultimately, for practices, this doesn't replace the human side of the business. It just enhances it, right? And that's what we want to do. It's going to allow the team inside the practice to focus on patient care, while our technology and the use of AI is going to ensure that every single inquiry is responded to that instantly, right? Quickly, consistently. And ultimately, the practices that start adopting this now are going to have a massive advantage over their competitors, because over the next few years, I mean, AI-driven communication is really going to become a standard part of how modern practices operate. And like I said, we're seeing it at a high level now, and it's only getting more and more aggressive and intense as time goes.
So I'm putting myself in the shoes of one of our clients, or really just any doctor, surgeon, medical practice owner out there that's listening to this right now. And I have to imagine one thing that they're probably thinking is, isn't that impersonal? If I have some AI chatbot responding to my leads, what do you say to those practice owners who maybe feel like that's impersonal, that feels like maybe AI could make mistakes and say something crazy as it's conversing with the lead and a potential patient, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, this AI has to be a reflection of their business. So, what do you say to somebody out there who's a little bit weary or maybe even skeptical that AI can actually do the things that you're saying?
Well, I mean, Jared, our clients, we've gotten that pushback various times with our clients. And this is what I tell them. I say, okay, you came to us and you wanted to grow your practice, right? You're clearly hitting a roadblock of growth. I mean, a lot of our practices that we worked with early on were on the cusp of closing down, right? And I think a lot of that is because they don't have the tools internally to nurture leads at a high level, but they need leads and need conversion. So what I would respond to that is, first of all, with all the respect in the world, doctor, do you have the time to do it yourself? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no, I don't. That's why I hired you guys. So then I say, okay, well, the solutions that we have and that your competitors are adopting right now is the concept of AI lead nurturing. And I would then sit them down and say, let's show you some examples of how personal our AI can be. And we give them a demo, right? We create a demo environment for them so they get a good idea and a good understanding of how this would operate in their practice. From there, I then ask them the question again. Does this feel impersonal to you? Does this feel like a robot? Does this feel very bot-like? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no, right? So my question for them is always, how bad do you want to scale? How much do you need to scale? Do you have the tools and the money, right? The capital to hire somebody to do this for you at scale? And the reality is they don't. And that's why we're working with them, in the first place. So if we're talking about scalability, it's important that we're adopting AI, because it doesn't matter if you're getting 5 leads a month or 3,000 leads a month. We can do this at scale, and the volume and the conversion rates are only going to skyrocket because there are no missed opportunities and drop balls along that process.
I think the scalability is a really important conversation because from our experience, there's a lot of staff turnover when you're talking about front desk, when you're talking about admin staff. Maybe sometimes they're on the team for 6 months, they get a different job, they get a better job, and they leave. And that puts the provider in a situation where now, first and foremost, they have to recruit, they got to hire a new front desk team, a new admin staff, and they got to train them on all the systems, all the processes, how to qualify leads, right? Speed to lead. They have to train them on these things all over again. And really AI is able to take that part of their job over. So it doesn't matter if there's turnover. They always know they're going to have a solution in place to be able to get back to leads as soon as possible, nurture them, communicate with them, answer questions, and get appointments scheduled. I think that can take a lot of weight off their shoulders, knowing that, hey, if my front desk leaves or I have a little bit of staff turnover, I'm not in a place where I have to stop all my marketing, stop all my advertising just to get this person hired. The other question I
Well,
want to
well,
ask you,
Jared,
Jake.
Jared, let me just stop you there real quick, because you bring up a crazy point, right? And what I'm about to say, like, proves how quickly AI is developing right now. But, and I don't want to sound like a dinosaur by any means, or archaic, or like an old man, because I'm not. But 5 years ago, I was working in house, right, at a med spa, at a wellness clinic in Miami, and we've talked about this. 5 years ago, AI didn't exist at scale like it does now, which meant we needed to hire real humans to do these things. And one thing that you said that I experienced at scale and at a really high level is staff turnover, and the tools and the resources needed to train every staff member following the one that just left. So you make such a good point, Jared, because with our AI agents, both voice and text, you never have to rehire and retrain ever again, which frees you up both, capital wise, resource wise, bandwidth wise. So, I mean, Jared, I'm so glad you brought that up, because from real world experience being inside a medical practice, I mean, I saw that happening month over month at a really fast pace.
And do me one more favor. You're talking about how human like the AI solutions that we build are. Pull the curtain back a little bit and explain how we get it to that level. Like, how do we make it converse and talk to people in a way that feels like they're talking to a real person?
So the AI that we build is going to be trained on the tonality and the personality of the business, right? And what I mean by that is we can literally train the sales aspect of it to be a shark, or to be super genuine and kind of, standoffish to the point where you don't want to be too down their throat when trying to convert a patient into, a paying patient, right? So the AI is so trainable in the sense of we can literally plug the personality of the business into the AI training so that it operates as a mirror to that front desk, to that practice, to that provider, right? And what's really cool about it is that every AI that we build is different from the next, because every practice and their blueprint fingerprint is different than the next. So we want to make sure that it operates at a very high level, human like, structure. And then we train it, right? We work with our clients to make sure that this sounds like them, right? This appears as them. And we challenge it all the time. We ask the craziest questions to it. Like, I mean, I was on with a client the other day, and we were talking about like weight loss solutions, just to train it and show them. And I think one of the things that I wanted to show them was how it handles like really, confrontational objections. So I think I asked and I said something like, I'm so overweight, my husband won't look at me anymore. I don't know what to do with myself. The AI simply responded and really resonated with that individual on a personal level, right? Like sympathize and empathize with that individual before it tried to go after the sale, right? After it did that, it built rapport like a human would. And then it went back to what we were trying to do with this conversation, which is book an appointment, right? And get a converted patient onto a weight loss program. So it's really trainable. It's as personal as a human would come off. And again, at scale. So I hope that answered your question, Jared.
No, I did for sure.
Cool. So Jared, my next question for you is, what's a real example of something simple making a significant difference for a practice today?
All right, something simple. A lot of practices offer free consultations, and on the surface, that sounds great because it lowers the friction to get that new patient to walk in the door, right? But what actually happens is people book appointments with zero commitment. So the practice owner ends up with a calendar that looks full, but in reality, a huge portion of those consultations either no show or cancel last minute. We've seen practices where 40 to 50% of consultations don't even show up because there was never a deposit taken or at least a credit card on file. And if a clinic can make one small change instead of completely offering a free consult, they can say something like, our consultations are $50 or, maybe start at $25. Like the price point itself is not that important, but just letting them know that, hey, we put this on file, we take a small deposit, and this amount can go towards whatever treatment or whatever service you end up moving forward with when you actually show up. And that one change does a few things immediately. First and foremost, the no-show rate drops dramatically, right? Because people now have skin in the game. Second, the people who do book and actually put that deposit down are usually more serious and financially prepared because they're comfortable putting down the deposit. So even though a practice might technically get a few fewer consultation bookings, more of the consults actually show up and the people sitting in the chair are much higher intent. We've seen scenarios where a practice went from something like 100 consult bookings with half of them no showing to maybe 65 bookings, but almost all of them show up. And the number of surgeries they actually close and the procedures they sell goes up dramatically as well. So it's the same marketing, it's the same offer. It's just one small operational change that can dramatically improve the quality of the pipeline and people showing up.
I love what you're saying, Jared, because this is also another thing that we see every day, which is no-shows and how to combat that. I personally, in my own experience, like I can't make an appointment anywhere without offering my credit card on file or paying a small deposit that may go towards whatever service I'm inquiring about or coming in for. So this is not an uncommon thing. And for those consumers and leads that are giving pushback about putting their card down or making a small refundable deposit, we're never the right lead in the first place. And we're not even going to waste our time with them because, again, we don't want to book 30 minutes on a client's calendar and them not show up because they weren't serious about it in the first place. I mean, this is so important. I really like this part of our podcast and sort of what we implement here because I like quick questions, quick answers. Don't think too much on it, Jared. Just like first thing that comes to mind based off of your experiences and what we do. My first question is going to be, what do you think the most important growth metric for practices are?
Cost per shown appointment.
I would agree.
Let me ask you, biggest mistake practices make with their marketing?
Thinking marketing alone is going to grow their practice. Marketing can generate interest, but if the positioning, the reputation, and the patient experience aren't strong, those opportunities are never, ever, ever, ever going to turn into real patients. Jared, most underrated growth strategy.
Consistent content on social media.
Interest media, not social media. Shout out to Gary Vee. He preaches that every day.
What role will AI play in practices 5 years from today?
Again, I could talk about this all day. I think AI is going to, be deeply integrated into how practices communicate with patients. I mean, we're already seeing it now, but from responding to inquiries to answering questions, helping schedule those appointments, I think the practices that adopt it early will simply operate faster and more efficiently versus their competitors. What was this other question I wanted to ask you, Jared, was what's one marketing channel every practice should be investing in right now?
I'm going to piggyback on my last response, and I'm going to say short form video on social media. As many social media channels that you can post on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, like just get some video content out there on social media. Let me ask you, what's one thing every practice should improve immediately?
The way that they communicate with potential patients, right? Most patients have questions before they book, naturally. So I think the practices that make it easy to get answers and start those conversations are going to win more of the opportunities than the dozens of other practices in your network and in your market. Jared, what's the biggest difference between practices that scale and those practices that struggle?
I'd say if I had to simplify that from what I've seen, the biggest difference is the practices that scale operate like a business and less like a medical practice. And what I mean by that is a lot of practices that aren't seeing the growth they want are largely focused on everything that happens once they acquire a patient and how they serve them from a provider and a treatment standpoint. But the business side is almost an afterthought. So things like how patients are acquired, how consultations are structured, how the front desk handles leads, follow up, tracking sales processes, thinking about brand and positioning. A lot of times those things are inconsistent or they're reactive. And the practices that really scale think about all of those things as a system at the end of the day. Jake, let me hit you with one. If you could give one piece of advice to a new practice owner, they just opened their business 2 months ago and they're ready to start accepting patients, what would that be?
This is easy. I was having this conversation with a practice with a provider last Friday, I think. So what I told them was start building your reputation online early, right? So patients research everything now: reviews, results, content, and the practices that show their work and build trust publicly, right, digitally, are going to grow much faster. So I would tell that practice owner off the jump, start building your reputation across all digital channels early. Jared, my last question for you. Let's see. What's one thing practices completely overlook when it comes to growth?
I'd say the experience for that patient before they actually show up in office. So what I mean by that is, let's say, they're looking at your content and they finally decide after a couple weeks of researching, which injector they want to go to. They're brand new to injectables. Like they've never gone to a med spa, they've never done any of those types of treatments before. And let's say they reach out at 8 p.m. when they finally decided, you're the provider that they want to go to. Typically, that practice doesn't get back to them until the next day. Maybe some of the interest and the enthusiasm for wanting to book an appointment for that treatment's worn off a little bit. So, responses are delayed. They don't get back to them right away, and ultimately ends in a lack of conversion. So, I would really say thinking strategically about what your processes look like when a new person actually reaches out to you and what that experience looks like before they actually show up in office.
Facts, facts. Yeah. So, I mean, Jared, great conversation as always. I think if you're a practice owner listening to this, the biggest takeaway is growth today isn't just about marketing.
No, it's not. It's about how patients experience your practice before they even walk in the door, right? What are they seeing online? What are they reading from other people? What are the results that they're seeing from you?
Yeah, and I think ultimately the practices that understand this early on are the ones that are going to win and are winning in today's market.
Cool. Well, I think that does it for us. Thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Conversations with GRX.
Yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.